and how we teach it. The issues, of course, go way beyond the flag, and the news in Texas today is that 5 million public school students will get new textbooks this fall that carry a pretty slanted view of the Civil War. This is all because the Texas State Board of Education set some new standards. That was back in 2010, and they're casting the Civil War in terms many simply wouldn't recognize, saying the conflict was caused by, quote, sectionalism, states' rights, and slavery, end quote. It's written in that order to cast slavery as a secondary issue, at least according to some members of the State Board of Education. And the books don't even mention the Ku Klux Klan or Jim Crow laws at all. Now, Rod Page, who's a Republican who served as Education Secretary for George W. Bush, is pushing back on the standards, saying they've swung too far to the ideological right, and they're diminishing the importance of civil rights, as well as the role of slavery, of course, in our history. Others are defending this type of revisionism. A Republican member of that board there saying, quote, there would be those who would say the reason for the Civil War was over slavery. No, it was over states' rights, end quote. In 2014, Texas Tech student political organization Polytech asked fellow students on campus who won the Civil War. A lot of answers to a tough question there. Joining me now, Kathy Miller, president of the Texas Freedom Network Group, which is against, of course, the textbooks, and also Don McLeroy, a former Texas Board of Education member. Welcome to you both. Don, how does this process work? Is it working?
Well, the process worked just fine. We have review committees that look at the text, they make recommendations, and then the board will look at their recommendations and will make changes and make amendments. I realized we had a problem right at the very beginning. I had kind of a canary in the coal mine standard. It was 8th grade U.S. History 8C, and our current standards that we had before we passed the new ones, and all it said was students are to describe religion's role in the foundational republic that we had. And when you look at when I got the new standards, the first work from these review committees, they had deleted that standard, the role of religion, and I was stunned, and I realized there was going to be a battle in our hands, and we did have a battle.
Kathy, your thoughts? I mean, it doesn't mean that it's working just because it's getting any old outcome. It would seem that you'd want to navigate between whatever the good faith disagreements may be. What we teach our children is always going to be some matter of controversy, but it's got to be factual too, right?
That's exactly right. The problem is that politicians are making the decision about what gets taught in history class instead of looking at our teachers and historians and scholars. Dr. McLeroy is not a historian, and his personal political beliefs should not dictate what our kids learn in school. The issue of the Confederacy was a very contentious point, with many board members, the majority in fact, asserting that states' rights was the central cause of the Civil War, ignoring the fact that the rights states were fighting for was the right to buy and sell human beings in slavery.
Don, on the Jim Crow front, do you think that should be in the history books?
I don't have any problem with putting into Jim Crow, the KKK. One of the greatest criticisms the board got was the fact that we had too many standards and too many requirements in there. There's too much to teach. It's fine with me to teach. They still can be taught. I have no problem. I think we need to teach all the real history. What's interesting about the causes of the Civil War, we never really discussed that very much. I know some board members made comments, but our review committees, the ones that Kathy just talked about that we need to listen to, back in the 7th grade history course for Texas history, they did not put slavery listed first either. They had states' rights ahead of slavery. It was just a non-issue. Slavery was included. The biggest rigmarole we ever got over slavery was in an economic standard in 8th grade early U.S. history. And what the standard said, it said that growth of the slave trade and the role of slavery. It had slavery mentioned in the standard. A motion was made in January of 2010 to change the slave trade, growth of the slave trade, to something like Atlantic triangular trade. There was no comment. In March, 2 months later, there was no comment, there was no objection, there was no newspaper stories, and then all of a sudden, right before our May adoption, there was a big hoopla about us trying to say we were downplaying slavery. And it was so amazing is when that issue was brought up, we put the word slavery back in there. We changed it to something that the triangular slave trade. So we ended up with slave and slavery, both words in the same standard. How in the world that could be construed as trying to downplay slavery is beyond me. We really never discussed it.
So Kathy, what is your response to that? Don's basically saying that it seems like outside forces, or I guess potentially the media, has made a bigger issue of this, and they're not actually trying to downplay it.
Two things. First of all, the outside forces were historians, people with expertise in the subject matter that were able to review what was being proposed in the curriculum standards and brought forth their concerns. But more importantly, this country is embroiled in a debate about how to talk about the Confederacy and whether government and universities honor the Confederate flag. We would not be having that debate if we haven't for generations taught incorrectly about the causes of the Civil War. And today, we should really look at what we teach our kids and ensure that it's not motivated by politics, but it's motivated by truth. And that's the problem I have with politicians like Mr. McLeroy and others who want to weigh in with their own political opinion on these matters instead of really relying on people with expertise and teachers in our classrooms.
And Mr. McLeroy, why do you think that it is important to at least some of the members, because I read one of the statements earlier, to say that the Civil War was not primarily fought over slavery? Why is that the issue here?
That was the issue mainly because some board members said it not at a board meeting, or if they did say it at the board meeting, it had no impact. We never debated it. We had long debates on all our history standards. So I myself personally think slavery has to be one of the primary reason for the Civil War, and I think our students are going to learn that. They're going to find out about it. And like I said, even the review teams that she's talking about, the panels that we authorize, these experts that she's talking about, they also, if you go to Texas history, you'll see on the causes of the Civil War, they listed states' rights ahead of slavery.
All right. Well, look, we wanted to talk to you both to get the perspective from the ground. This story's obviously gotten a lot of attention, and with the Confederate flag debates, very interesting to see how the history and the debates are still with us. Kathy Miller and Don McLeroy, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Still